Okay, there we go. Now we are recording and I'll announce the date. It is January 10th and this is the Northeast Hazel Dell Neighborhood Association meeting.
Okay, Kim, you have the floor.
All right, well, here we go. Okay, so I'm just going to be real brief and quick because I was asked earlier just to come because we had our meeting last night, or the night before, excuse me. So I'm Curtin Creek neighborhood president. Curtin Creek is, just so you know, the boundaries are 50th, 94th, 119th into Padden, pretty much Costco, the light industrial area, Mutual Materials, Grow, plus several residential areas. And that is who we are. We have the railroad that goes pretty much right through our property, our community. And you probably know us best because at one point they were thinking about a concrete plant in that area behind Mutual Materials. You all probably heard about that in the newspaper and things. And so that's smack in the heart of our community. So it's another thing that's smack in the heart of our community is Curtin Creek watershed, our natural preserve. And it's really important because it's a watershed that feeds into the Salmon Creek. So it's very important area for us to keep pristine, natural, and so on. So that area there is very important. Myself, I got involved in this whole thing as far as neighborhood associations go, because I realized what is done now doesn't really affect us until 4, 5, 10 years down the road. I found this out when they did high density cottages, when they presented that in 2018. Didn't think anything about it until 2022, when I found 9 acres next to our neighborhood being developed for this high density. Didn't want it, but it was already too late because it was already planned and put into place. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the railroad and why it is important. So I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Pull up a map for you all. Let's hold on here. So are you able to see that? Am I sharing yet?
I'm only seeing the gallery screen.
All right, hold on here. It's always fun to try to do this. I'm new at this whole Zoom thing on this sharing the screen thing, so I know I have to get up here and do share screen. Let's see if I can. Come on, baby. Here, let's see. Sign in, share screen. Up, it's down here at the bottom. All right, here we go. All right, let's pull that map up. Okay, share. Open system preferences. Let's see, I'm hoping this works here. Is that working? Nope.
No.
Sorry, guys. I have it on my screen. You guys just got to get it over there to see you guys. Sorry about this. Come on, Bebs. Open systems. Sorry, I got a new. I got out of town before the snow, by the way.
Well, we weren't going to tell anybody where you were, where you
Okay.
are. So I was asked to keep that a secret.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. As I'm trying to get on here. I should have probably played with this before I got on there because I got a whole different computer than I did yesterday. All right. Well, I am not going to be able to share the screen very well, and that is going to bother me. Isla, are you able to share a screen?
Well, I'm only able to function on my phone tonight because my laptop is picking it up, so nobody could see anything. It'd be like this big.
I should have checked them on a whole different computer system, so that's really kind of a bummer. But anyway, what I was going to show you was how the railroad works, and I have it. I think, Belle, did you get it? Do you
Kim,
have it? See, yeah.
According to my Zoom, it said that that Marilee has disabled screen sharing.
Yeah, but she opened mine up. Let me see. She was nice enough to do mine. So maybe, Marilee, can I send this to you maybe? Are you there?
She may have stepped away once she got us going.
Okay.
Yes, you can send it to me.
All right. It's just one Marilee. So I'm going to send it to you, Rhoda.
It's
There
a
you
good app and it really gives a good idea of what's what
It
is it.
it really does. So I really want you guys to see it. So hopefully she can pull this up. And sorry about that little glitch, guys. I forgot completely. I'm on my laptop and not my computer at home. So by the way, you have to get in there and get permission to share your screen with Zoom. Sorry. That is my issue. So once she pulls this up, it'll give you a better idea. It's a map I showed everyone on Monday night.
This is one of those awkward silences that for some reason I just want to fill with something.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. I'm not getting anything yet.
Okay. Well, it should be coming. And what it's going to show you, it's going to show you exactly. So we have 33 miles of railroad line, and the map will show you exactly how it crosses our county. That's why it makes it such a good map, so you can understand where you're at and exactly how that affects you. Bridget found another one yesterday too that shows all the crossings, which is amazing to me how many railroad crossings there are. Because if the railroad does get to be a larger point, our larger presence in our community, these railroad crossings will be really important to us all. So right now, the county and is looking at a 1 mile overlay on each side of the railroad for heavy, and they would like to have an overlay to rezone it for heavy industrial or so heavy industrial is a little bit different than what we have right now in our area, which is light industrial, mutual materials, your grow, your different warehouses and things like that we have now in our community ourselves. So anyway, so here's the map. So if you can imagine on each side of this, and this is and I believe it's for the whole 33 miles of this, they want to put an overlay on this of 1 mile on each side for heavy industrial. And what an overlay does is mean that it's possible rezoning to heavy industrial. And like I said, remember, this is what's happening now. This is the beginning, and things do change, but this is what they're asking to do right now with any property. And this is important to understand, any property within that mile that toe touches it. And I mean that touches it maybe 20 feet could also possibly be heavy industrial. And I want you to understand that, because if you have a parcel over here and the railroad comes out here a mile, but there's a 40-acre parcel over here that touches that property, it could also be rezoned into heavy industrial. And this is kind of what is concerning to all of us. Because do we want our county to be heavy industrial? Because the whole line itself cannot support that right now. Now, you're going to hear about grants and all kinds of other things that they're proposing. But honestly, to do that's a lot of railroad to have to upgrade, and who's going to pay for those upgrades, and how much is it ultimately going to cost? cost. Now, you'll hear a lot about it's good for the economy, will bring jobs. But once again, we have yet to see anything presented, literally presented, to show us that. I'd love to see a study done on this, on exactly what kind of jobs it's going to bring, what kind of heavy industrial it's going to bring. But you can see this portion, and I don't know if you can, probably can't see my computer, but you can see from Vancouver Lake all the way up to Battleground and how that will impact us. I was explaining to him on Monday night where I live personally. I cross 3 railroad tracks going either way. I can cross it on 72nd, I can cross it on St. John's, and I cross it again on 119th. And that's not even going up 503 and the railroad tracks there. So this is all a big issue. Please pay attention to the council, understand what they're saying, and realize that what's happening today may not affect you unless 4 years down the road and you have a piece of vacant land next to you and you want to know why it's zoned heavy industrial, because of the start of this process. So it's the beginning of the process that you have to understand. It's ultimately important for our community that we do the right thing. And I am not against the railroad. I'm going to state that right now. I believe it is a good resource for us, but we have to make the right choice. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Just, it's time to pay attention and watch what's happening in your community. And I told Bill that I was going to be very long. And I know all the questions. I see a couple hands up. Please direct them to Bill. He will. Is that what you want to do, Bill?
Well, I'm gonna let's have Commissioner Belcott or
Okay.
Councilor
Council
Belcott.
Belcott?
Yes, thanks, Bill, for that. Actually, Kim, there is a study that was done by Columbia River Economic Development about the jobs that the railroad will produce and the amount, not only the amount of income that it would generate, but also the number of jobs that would be created as a result of the railroad. And nothing has been definitively decided as far as the railroad goes. Actually, just today, we were just talking about a consultant study that we are getting ready to award, that an RFP went out. And that RFP and that study is looking specifically at the railroad and what needs to be done with the railroad. But there is a county website that's dedicated to the railroad that includes the railroad lease and what the county responsibilities are as concerned to the lease, and also the work that has to be done periodically on the railroad to be in compliance with our lease. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts. Nothing's a done deal at this point. So
Totally understand. Yeah, I understand that completely. And it for that research or the results of that thing that you said, I'd love to see a copy of that, because is that on the county webpage? I mean, is that study
I
on
sent it
there?
to you this
Because that would be
afternoon.
really nice to see.
And I sent it to you this afternoon.
All right, perfect. So that would be perfect. And I totally understand, Councilor Belcott, that nothing is in stone. I am just trying to make sure that everyone is aware of it. It's kind of like the cottage study in 2018. Take a look at that and what was presented at that time, and please take a look at what's being built at this time, because they do not jive for what was presented and what we have today. So I'm trying to make sure everyone in our community is aware that you got to pay attention to the very beginning, because once it's passed and once it's gone over into the land of able to do it, things do happen, and we have to be aware of that. So
yeah, I encourage everyone to look at you can look at the lease and to see what the county responsibilities are. There's a lot of, I think, confusion related to that, because people aren't looking at our actual county lease with the railroad to see what our responsibilities are. But we can't just let the railroad languish. You know, there's some safety issues and compliance issues that are involved. And I really highly encourage people to go to that website. We've made a lot of improvements on that recently, related to the railroad facts.
Okay, thank you. Isla, can you be brief with your question?
Of course. Ye of little faith. One of the things I was just going to mention to Kim is that she's, whoopsie, something went, pardon me. Are you still there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the things that has happened is the county has spent a fortune setting up Curtin Creek Park. And that's like 9 acres, very expensive, very important. North County just doesn't have the kind of quality of life resources that they need. And they spent, it was a wonderful project. It isn't over yet. It won't be for a bit, but this whole railroad thing just bangs right on top of it. It's something to look at and consider. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Kim, thank you for taking time out of your day to come and fill us in.
Much.
Greatly appreciate it.
Yep. Anytime. And thank you guys for having me.
Sure. You are more than welcome to stick around. Our main presenter is next. He's very interesting, very informative, but I understand if you have to leave. So
I'm afraid I do, but thank you guys. I appreciate it very much.
okay. Marilee, do you have a question real quick?
Just letting everyone know that the webpage that Councilor Belcott mentioned, I put the link in the chat.
Great, thank you. Did everybody get that? Okay, hearing nothing, I'll take that as a yes. Okay, our main presenter for tonight is Brian Salsig, CCSO Senior Management Analyst. And I think he can probably do a better job of introducing himself and what he's going to present that I can. So I'm going to shut up and give him the floor.
Thank you, sir. Sorry. Again, my name is Brian Salsig. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for about, it's only been 23 years, but you know, sometimes it feels like 24. So it's been a good time. Originally I was hired as the crime analyst, and then I spent a short duration in IT, and now I'm the senior management analyst, which I think makes me the boss of all the numbers. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about crime. Let's see here. Let me share my screen. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect.
Yes, I can.
All right. And so lucky for you guys, since you guys are like one of my first community meetings at the beginning of the year, we just closed out 2023. So I have just the awesome new 2023 stats that I'll be presenting now in 2024. And we can just kind of go through the different kinds of like crime that we're seeing and the different trends. I apologize a little bit ahead of time. Normally I like to really dig deep into each of the neighborhood associations, but the software that I use to do that with is unfortunately not available at this point in time. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll get it fixed. So, but we still have some really great stats that we can share and some stuff we can talk about. So first we're going to talk about measures of crime, and then calls for service, a little bit about cases and how cases and crimes kind of go hand in hand. And then also talk about the Sheriff's Office deployment event. In fact, we'll start with that. So I'm not sure how many people were like going to come to the community meeting. I think almost everyone actually knows John Horch, who's the sheriff, but just in case, right, that's John Horch. He's got a budget of approximately $43 million and responds to about 75,000 calls for service a year. Not him personally. He has a lot of deputies that help him respond to those calls, but for the most part, that's a lot of work. His undersheriff is a nice gentleman named Jim Hansen, who's incredibly competent. And I'm not saying that just because they're on the line. I would say that anyway. They're actually really good folks. Chief Criminal Deputy Brian Kessel is responsible for 155 sworn officers. Those officers patrol 510 square miles and a population of about 241,000 individuals, which is a lot, actually. That makes us at 0.64 officers per 1,000 residents, which is very low in comparison to most agencies. In fact, I got a slide about that. As you can see here, this is a per 1,000 resident slide with a bunch of different sorts of agencies. Not every agency is a great comparison, right? The New York Police Department is probably has the largest number of officers in the United States. It's huge, right? It only patrols mostly just Manhattan. And so they have a lot more officers per square mile than most people do, and a lot more officers per resident than most people do. But I put them on here just to kind of see, like, this is the spectrum that you see, right? You've got New York that's way out in the end, and then you got us, which is over on the right-hand side. That's kind of, we're holding it down. But like when people used to talk about defunding the police, it was interesting because I used to get some calls about like, well, how do you actually patrol and how do you actually use law enforcement when your staffing level is so low in comparison to your community? Because it is a bit unusual that we do it this way. And to kind of give some perspective, like if we wanted to like move if we wanted to get to the same level of policing that they have in New York, we'd have to hire 810 new officers, which is that's ridiculous. This is a ridiculous amount of officers. But just to kind of put that in perspective. If we wanted to do something more like reach King County's level of officers per 1,000, we'd have to hire 245 new officers, which is still quite a bit. I mean, remember, we're at 155 right now, and that number is taken into account the 7 new positions that were just given to us by council. Thank you, council, for that. And that's fantastic. Obviously, those positions aren't filled yet because we just got them, but we would still need 245 new to get to the level that King County has. And then even like Portland Police across the way, it would require 174 new officers. So it's just to kind of keep that in mind, like when Sheriff's talking about staffing, one, just hiring to get to those levels has been difficult for all agencies at this point in time. And I got to really credit our recruiting efforts at this point in time because we've got some great candidates and we're filling those spots as fast as we can. And it's pretty impressive. Chief Civil Deputy Duncan Haas is in charge of basically all the support personnel. There's roughly about 103 support personnel, and includes such things as a 40,000 item evidence warehouse, the civil unit, which does like orders and evictions and seizures and all sorts of stuff like that. And then criminal records, which is kind of like the core of what that position is all about. We handle about 12,000 reports in a year. And so there's quite a bit of work that goes on. And of course, we're a 24/7 agency, so we have to staff appropriately so that we can meet those needs at any given time, regardless of, day, night, weekend, holiday, whatever. And Chief Administrative Deputy Mike McCabe, he's responsible for all of our new major projects. He's currently the temporary chief of Battleground, which is pretty awesome for him, I guess. Hopefully he doesn't like it too much there and stay, because we really want to keep him at the sheriff's office where he's at now. He's also head of the body cam project, which is just getting started, and we're really excited about that. Officers are excited about that. I'm excited about that. It's going to give us a whole new level of technology, plus the information that's going to come out of it is going to be great. Really looking forward to that. And then he's also looking at our new facility procurement. Obviously, as the jail's growing and they're redesigning, in fact, I think there was a meeting about that today. The sheriff's office is going to have to find a new home, and we're going to hopefully, that'll be McCabe's work on that to try to help make sure that we find a place that's going to be suitable for us. So let's talk a little bit about stats. So in law enforcement, there's basically the first thing that happens is a calls for service. A call for service is a 911 call, and it can happen in 2 ways. One is somebody calls us, which is a dispatch call, or we initiate the call ourselves, like with a traffic stop or with we go out with somebody or something like that. So this slightly complicated graph basically shows you that in 2019, we had just short of 80,000 calls for service. And so this gray area up here indicates these are the self-dispatch. So these are the officer initiated calls. This orange section here indicates these are when somebody has called us from 911, so that we're going to a citizen who needs our assistance for whatever reason. And then the blue down here is specialty calls. And they could be sometimes having to do with like warrants. In other cases, it could be civil calls or evictions and things like that. So you'll notice in 2021, there's a huge drop, and that's because we weren't doing evictions in 2021, right? COVID and all those sorts of things. And so there's a huge drop, and then we're slowly recovering from that now. At the top, you'll also see the same kind of thing that in 2019, we were doing a lot of officer initiated things. And then we had a huge problem with staffing that we're just slowly recovering from. And so we don't have as many officers available to do those self-initiated calls like we used to. And so last year was the least amount of self-initiated calls that we've done in quite a long time. But you also notice that the orange bar here is relatively consistent from year to year, and that's the number of people who are calling us. And so that's, everything from like, well, hopefully you don't have a murder in your house, but that would be bad. We would definitely go to that, right? To like fireworks calls, right? So there's a whole spectrum of calls that end up in this dispatched area. And like I said, for the most part, it's trending down, but it's only trending down in the areas due to staff just not being able to do those self-initiated calls anymore. As we recover with staffing, this should hopefully go back up as more and more officers are doing that self-initiated work. And so just to kind of look at it. All right. Does anybody have any questions about anything so far? All right, I'll continue on. All right, calls for service, they're not all exactly the same. So we have basically priority 1 through priority 5. And priority 1 is like, I'm running from a person with a knife. This is lights, sirens, multiple cars. It is a big deal. We are going to get there as quickly as we can. Traffic is, we're going to blow lights. We're going to do all sorts of stuff to make sure that we get to you and as safe as possible. Priority 2 is I hear screaming, yelling, and breaking furniture, and obviously there's something next door that's a huge problem. And again, we are going to respond very quickly in that situation and get to there. Priority 3 was your house is burglarized, your car was stolen. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of everything the sheriff's office does. A huge chunk of our call falls within this priority 3, as you see, like 50% of our calls are priority 3 versus priority 1, which is a lot fewer. Like I think last year we had 218. And to put it in perspective, a priority 1 call will require at least 3 officers to respond to. So 3 cars, right? And say it's a good day and we manage to fill all our beats, right? We've only got, say, like maybe 5 people in Central and 4 in West. And so that 3 is a significant issue. And if we have 2 priority 1 calls going on, then of course that's even less personnel. And usually at that point in time, we have to start calling for assistance from the city that's closest to us. So while we have very few priority 1 calls, they are the ones that we're most concerned about and they require the most resources. And then even after we get there, they take a long time to work through and the rest of it, because there's usually report writings and detectives and scenes to secure and possibly people to chase and all of those kinds of things. So while we don't have nearly as many priority 1s, as they creep up over the years, I start to get concerned just because it requires a lot of available people at the same time. And then it just reduces our ability to do other things during that same time. The priority 4 is basically a traffic collision. So it's something that's, it's important that we get to, but hopefully in this case, that there's no concern about loss of life or anything else. It's mostly just a property damage thing. And priority 5 only has 1 category, and that's fireworks. And this becomes like important 2 times a year, as you can imagine, once over New Year's and then once again over 4th of July. And then all sorts of people want to know stats on that because, whether you're pro firework or anti firework, people really want to know how many kind of calls are coming in and what's being done about those things. So as calls come in throughout the day, they don't come in a regular fashion. If they did, it would be great because you could like basically say, well, Bill's on duty right now. We can expect him to have 3 calls, and then John's going to come on duty, and we can expect him to have 3 calls. But that's not how it works. We could have 6 calls at once, or we could have 1 call. And so what this chart shows is basically trends over the years. And I've been doing this 22 years now. So this line has been very, 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 very stable. And it looks like this all the time. This is 6 a.m. This is 6 a.m. in the morning. That's when we have very few calls, right? And then they start to creep up as people wake up and realize that they've been a victim of a crime, or, there's more people driving. So now we have more collisions, all of those sorts of things. And then calls peak right here, right around 4:30. And that's when we have the most calls at any given time. And there's a wide variety of reasons for that, right? One is you have a lot of people on the road at this point in time. Schools are just getting out. Individuals are finding out that homes have been burglarized or cars have been stolen. And then, other people may have had things that happened throughout the day that they're not going to report until they get home. And so then the calls start to happen. Up to that point in time, calls start to decrease. But you should notice that, and this graph doesn't do a great job of explaining this, but the more difficult calls usually happen towards the evening, right? And that's usually like when the DV calls kind of come out, drunk and disorderly, large parties, things like that, that require a lot more focus from officers. And so while this period of time is a decreasing amount of calls, the effort required to actually handle those calls actually kind of goes up. So, and then eventually, like everyone starts to finally go to sleep, and then, there's a lot less activity, a lot less people that are active, and our calls start to drop dramatically. So another way to look at this, from our perspective and what we look at, is like the ability of when calls kind of come in. So looking over the last 4 or 5 years, right? This is right here. This is 12 o'clock. This is noon. At some point in time, we had 8 calls going on at the same time, right at noon, right? And so this graph shows that that's uncommon for the most part. Most of the time we have this many calls. This is 50%, right? And so this blue line indicates the number of officers who have the ability to respond to calls based on our staffing level currently. So normally we can handle about 2 calls a given hour. We have enough officers to kind of go through all of that, right? So, but when you start to creep up at this 50% line, so right about 2 o'clock, we start to lose the ability to, we start receiving more calls. Sorry, this is a gap right here, as you see. We start to lose, we have more calls coming in and we have officers available to respond to them. But then our swing shift comes on and now we're doing a little bit better because we have more officers available to us. And then finally, as swing leaves and only graveyard remains, we have that same kind of gap issue where we have more calls coming in than we have officers available. And then there's just this slight time frame right here, just a few hours when we have both swing and grave available, where the calls are decreasing and we have a number of officers. And this is usually when we kind of catch up throughout the day, as everything kind of gets shoved a little bit. And this is where the cleanup occurs. So most of the time, 50% of the time, we have the officers that we need to respond to a call, but that also means that 50% of the time we don't. And then what happens is we start to prioritize calls. Calls end up in the queue, right? So we'll end up waiting a little bit longer to get to that traffic accident because we're going to go and take, probably the burglary or something else first. That's a little bit more important. We're eventually going to get to all the calls. We've never been in a situation where we haven't been able to reach all of our calls, but it gets tight some days. In terms of where those calls are happening, not a huge surprise for anyone who's lived in this community, right? So this is Clark County, if you can kind of see it, right? Here's I-5, here's 205. And of course, I-5 being right here. And then down here, this is Hazel Dell. And so it's nice, bright and red because there's a lot of activity that happens during this in this area. And then over here in Orchards, right? There's a lot of things that go on in Orchards as well. And this is just sheriff's office calls. So this doesn't include anything from the city. This only includes calls that the sheriff's office has responded to. And so a lot of activity that goes on in this area. It's not to say that it's all unsafe. It's just calls that we're responding to on a regular basis. And there's just a lot of them. And so zooming in just a little bit more on Highway 99. So here's Highway 99, 80th, right? Here's 205 to kind of orient you. Obviously, Highway 99 is just a magnet, right? Because you have a lot of commercial, you got a lot of high density residential. And so there's a lot of people there, right? So nobody actually lives at Walmart, but a lot of crime occurs at Walmart because, it's a big parking lot. There's a lot of people there, a lot of potential victims, things like that. So usually we see that this is no different than anywhere else in the United States where your commercial areas have a little bit higher crime than your residential areas. And then you almost see it kind of dissipate as you move away from the commercial areas and get into the residential areas. So we spend a lot of our time patrolling Highway 99. We try to get into the neighborhoods when we can, and we have the ability to. And then for the most part, the other thing we kind of really look at too is like collisions and when collisions are occurring. So the most likely time for a collision to occur is 2 p.m. at Highway 99 and 99th Street. The reason for that is you got people just coming back from lunch trying to push that envelope a little bit, and you got a lot of traffic in that area, and that's just ripe for a collision. So, and we know that, so we try to patrol that area better when we can. All right, let's talk about the way that reports come in. So we just talked about calls. So we do about 75,000 calls a year. And then so we write about one report for every 6 calls. So not every call requires a report, right? Because some of the calls we get to, and it's just, I saw a suspicious person in our neighborhood. And so we're going to respond. We're going to look for that suspicious person. We may make a contact, we may not, but it doesn't always result in a crime. So we don't actually write a police report on that. Now, when a crime does occur, it's not usually just one crime. So this is like a hypothetical scenario to figure out how we kind of count these crimes. So suspect breaks into a home. They break out a window, which is vandalism, right? They've broken into the home, which is now a burglary. They punch the homeowner, knocking them unconscious, which is now aggravated assault because they've caused some serious damage. They shove the homeowner's romantic partner and take their keys. So now we also have a robbery. And then finally, they steal the vehicle when they flee the scene. So this is fun for those of us who like count crimes, because most people like one incident to be one crime, right? You really just want like it's a auto theft or it's a robbery, but these complicated events happen. And so then there's a question about how do you count this, right? And there's a couple different ways. Now, you can use what's called the worst case method, which is like the worst crime in all of that scenario that just occurred was the robbery, and we could just count just the robbery. And in some places they do that. Other places use an older version of what a statistical method called the uniform crime reports. These are reported to the FBI, and so it's an old version, but they would count the number of victims at the worst crime. So they would count just the robbery, but they would count it twice because there was 2 people that it occurred to. And then more recently, like in the last 10 years, there's been this push for national incident-based reporting, right? NIBRs. It's a big deal, particularly for the sheriff's office and other places. It's a great process. The problem is it complicates the reporting process. So from the deputy's perspective, if they only had to fill out one crime, they're going to finish that report real quick. If they have to fill out 2 crimes, well, it's going to take them a little bit longer. And when you do NIBRs, it's the most complicated of the processes, but it gives us the best data to work with. And so in NIBRs, you're going to count each one of those individual crimes that occurred, and then you're going to put it all together. So the stats that I'm going to show you here in just a little bit are all NIBRs crimes, right? So that's how we're counting. So it may not be, when we talk about sexual assault, it might just be the sexual assault, but that case also could have included a robbery, which shows up in statistics later on. So just be aware of that there might be some double counting of the numbers. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there. All right, so let's talk about sexual assault. Horrific crime, obviously. It was trending up until 2022, and then in 2023, it has been a really good year for us, and for most crimes, it took a nosedive, which is great. Now, sexual assault for what we're talking about includes everything from actual rape to unwanted touching. So there's a little bit of a spectrum there. And it's great that it's decreasing. Obviously, 0 is the best, but I'm glad to see that we've had at least some drop off in comparison to 2022 to 2023. It's always great to break those rising trends. In rape in Clark County, nearly all the victims know their offenders. In fact, I would say that 99.9% of the time, those 2 things occur, that the victim and the offender have some sort of relationship. It may not be a long-term relationship, but they usually know each other. Stranger rape in Clark County, and I should knock on wood, is incredibly rare. Thank goodness. And so I think over the course of 22 years, I think we've maybe investigated it 4 times. So it's not common at all. Also having to do with rape, drugs or alcohol are often used to overcome the victim's resistance in some way, shape, or form. And it's just something to know. Usually when I give this presentation to like college age kids or to like high schools, it's one of those things that I like to try to remind them that like drugs and alcohol, I mean, I guess they're good for a good time, but they really do hamper your ability to make good decisions. and they may make you accused of being a victim. And not to victim blame, it's just one of those things that you should be aware of. And if you're gonna, do those sorts of activities, be safe, be with a group when you can be, have people watch out for you, those sorts of things. Robbery's been kind of interesting to watch over the years. So this includes all sorts of basically forced committed theft, right? So it includes bank robberies and carjackings and shoplifters that push employees as they leave the door. So robbery is kind of interesting just because there's so many different various types. The vast majority of crimes are aggressive shoplifters. And so in 2022, we saw a massive increase in shoplifting and very aggressive shoplifting, where people were pushing guards and getting out of the way and all sorts of stuff. You'll notice in 2023, we had a little bit of a drop off, which is great. And then bank robberies have become very rare, which is kind of interesting as well. When I first got started, we had, I don't know, probably maybe 24 bank robberies in a given year. And then I think last year we had one, right? Like, so there's not a lot of bank robberies that occur anymore. Several reasons for that, but yeah, it's just one of those interesting statistics. Most people think of robbery and they think bank robbery, but not so much anymore, right? It's much more likely to have something to do with shoplift or somebody hassling you on the street trying to take your stuff. Aggravated assault, for the most part, has been relatively stable. In 2020, we saw a little bit of a climb having to do with COVID, which was kind of interesting. We had a lot of people cohabitating together that normally would have probably have broken up and moved to different places, but just due to the lockdown and other things, had a tendency to stay together longer. And it kind of had a worse effect on the whole aggravated assault and DV, unfortunately. Just to explain a little bit more about aggravated assault, it's when a weapon's used or the victims are so serious, the injuries are so serious, it requires hospitalization. All right, and in the case of aggravated assault, very similar to sexual assault, most victims know their suspect. We don't have a lot of random people just coming up and smacking you on the head or trying to push you down, which is good. And when those sorts of things occur, they really rise to the top of the things that we're interested in investigating. Our tactical detective unit is very effective, and they have a tendency to stop those things almost immediately. Brandishing is one of those interesting new crimes that started out we've had brandishing for a long time. That's usually when you display a weapon. You show a gun or you show like a knife or something like that. During COVID, this became like popular. Like people really were into this whole, like, I'm going to show guns for some reason. And not just necessarily to actually make the assault, but just to show it, particularly while they were driving. And which is kind of scary because that means that their hand's not on the wheel. They've got hands on a gun, which is even more crazy because they're actually driving. So that's just one of those new and upcoming things that we've been noticing. And again, you kind of see 2020 was the height of everything. And now in 2023, we're about the same. Now, simple assaults are the less vicious sort of assaults. They usually just involve somebody smacking or hitting or punching somebody else. Nobody has gone to the hospital, right? And so these are much more common. When you look at the numbers, you'll see, we had 200 aggravated assaults, but we have close to almost 3 times, if not more, of that number of simple assaults. So we have a lot of simple assaults. Again, most of the victims know their suspects, and alcohol, as you can imagine, is a very common factor in these assaults. So, and roughly, I would say at this point in time, 45% are related to DV, and the others are whatever else that kind of go along with that. So everything from bar fights to kids going at it in the parking lot, things like that. Burglary is definitely yo-yoed a little bit, as you see with this graphic, which is kind of interesting. This crime basically includes unauthorized entry to your premise. So it could be to your house, or it could actually be to your garage, or to like an outbuilding or something like that. And you'll notice that this kind of weird trend that we've followed. During 2020, one of the things that we noticed is more people are at home. So house entry, somebody breaking into your house, wasn't as common. So a lot of people think of burglary as like a nighttime activity, but that's not actually the case. So most burglars will burgle during the day when you're at work because they don't want you to be in the house when they're trying to break into the house because you might stop them, and they definitely don't want to be caught, right? So most of the time, almost all of your residential burglaries occur during the day. And then the opposite is true for your commercial burglaries. Obviously, you don't want to burglarize the business while it's open. You want to wait till it's closed and then break in and try to take whatever's in there, take their safe or take TVs or whatever else. So you'll notice this kind of odd trend in 2020, which was kind of during the COVID era. Instead of people breaking into the house, they were then taking things from garages and open garages and pole barns and things like that because they no longer had access to the house, but they were still taking items. And then you'll notice this big spike in 2022 where at that point in time, people are back at work, but we still have a lot of burglars in the area. So they're hitting the house, they're hitting the garage, commercial burglaries go on the rise again. And then we've seen a drop in 2023, which has been good. So, and there's been a switch in what people have taken over the years. So in 2018, right, that's not really on the chart, but the most common items stolen during a residential burglary were jewelry and medication, right? Going after medication is huge, particularly since most burglars are drug affected. And so they're really interested in getting high, particularly if you have pain medications at home. In 2023, the most common items stolen in residential burglaries are power tools and yard equipment. So that's a complete, almost a switch over. It's not to say that they won't go after any sort of items that you have around the house, small electronics, you know, jewelry and all the rest of it. But a lot of the times they're just taking what's easily accessible, which is like when the garage is open, they'll go in and they're going to steal your weed eater or your chainsaw or whatever you have available. Switching from burglary to just regular old theft, you'll see that there's this massive decrease in 2023, which is fantastic. The vast majority of it is fueled by this drop in catalytic converter thefts. And that's because the price of metal has changed and catalytic converters are no longer worth what they were. So we're seeing a lot less of those kinds of theft. And then some legislation was put into place over in Oregon that made some of this stuff more difficult to sell. And so I think those two things kind of put together resulted in this huge drop off that you're seeing. Motor vehicle theft. If you've looked in the news, everyone's talking about this and for good reason. Motor vehicle theft peaked in 2022. We had so many vehicle thefts. It was crazy, like over 1,000, which has never occurred at any other point in time. And then in 2023, we had a pretty decent drop off. And a couple reasons for that. I mean, obviously, some of it has to do with law enforcement, right? Our tactical detective unit and the city's well, they used to be called the neighborhood response teams. Now I think they're called something CRU. Did a good job of trying to identify some of those individuals that were causing issues. The PA's office has 2 dedicated prosecutors who do nothing but work on auto theft, which is great. And so some of those cases were finally started to get through the court system. A lot of them had languished due to COVID, but now that the courts are back up, they were going through cases and churning them out faster. So all that occurred. The most common vehicles being stolen in Clark County, Hondas and Civics for forever, right? The 1992 to 2003, the vehicles, these vehicles are still around. The ignitions are easy to punch. It's really easy to steal, which is why they're so popular. Screwdriver will just basically turn it on at this point in time. And then starting around COVID, we noticed there was a sharp increase in Ford F-150s, F-250s, F-350s. And again, they're kind of the earlier models. And for the most part, they're not, the vehicles themselves, it's not like they're newer or anything else. It's just the idea that they're easy to kind of break into and take. And then a lot of the Fords were losing their catalytic converters. So they would steal the vehicle to get it to a place where they could just basically take the catalytic converter. And then most recently, as you've probably seen in the news, the Kia boys, 2015 to 2021. If you don't know about this, basically, all the cars produced by both Kia and Hyundai during this time have a very easy way to break into the ignition and to steal the car and start the car. And so this became a huge problem. In fact, we had some Kia boys here that were eventually arrested up in Seattle. And so that's one of those things that I think the legislator actually in the state of Washington is trying to hold both Kia and Hyundai like accountable for the idea that they built all these vehicles knowing that there was very little theft deterrent built into the vehicle itself and that they were so easy to steal. So I'll be curious to see how that turns out. So another interesting thing about motor theft that's going on these days is that When I first got started, it was a really common thing to see your vehicle get stripped. So like they would steal your car and then they would start taking all the parts off of it. And then they would sell those parts like on Craigslist or eBay or whatever else. Over the years, that has become a lot less popular. I don't know if it's just more work or it's just easier to get into the junkyard these days or necessarily why that is. But the vast majority of vehicles at this point in time that are stolen for one of two reasons. One, younger kids taking it for a joyride. So when they take it, they literally drive it like they stole it and it is going to come back wrecked, guaranteed. The other reason why they seem to be stealing a lot of vehicles is for shelter. So when it gets cold outside and some of these vehicles are so easy to steal, it's really easy for those who are in the houseless community to find temporary shelter in a stolen vehicle. It's just kind of one of those interesting facts that we've picked up over the last couple of years. All right, so this is at kind of the end of my presentation, talking about all those different crime stats and that kind of stuff. But I like to try to end on something better. For those of you who don't know, Drew Kennison was in a collision. Tree branch broke off, and basically, this is the car and what it looked like. Ended up losing his leg. But he is just an incredible individual, and here he is. This is just a couple days ago where he's getting back into his patrol car and he's patrolling with us once again. And it's just an amazing story. I cannot speak highly enough of this gentleman and his perseverance. He's a credit to our agency and just a great human being who I just thoroughly enjoy. So yeah, good for him and good for having him back on patrol for sure. All right. That's kind of the end of what I've got going on. I'm open for any kind of questions that anyone might have. Yeah, sure, Kathy. Oh, you're still on mute.
Oh, I had to find the button. It got hidden in the presentation. So I mentioned I was looking forward to this because we've had issues here in my apartment complex that we've had cars getting broken into, and I guess one of them actually successfully stolen. Are the bars, the lock, steering wheel lock bars, are those effective?
I'm going to say majority of the time, yes. If they really want your vehicle, they'll saw through the steering wheel and just pop out the bar. But you got to remember in terms of like, if most criminals are low effort individuals, right? They are going to be like, I want to steal something, but I want to put a lot of effort into it. So if there's two cars together and one of them has a bar on it, I'm not going to choose that car. I'm going to go for the one without the bar, right? And so I got to really want to get in there and not just steal the car, but to also saw off the steering wheel to kind of get into it. And that's just a whole other level. So as a deterrent, it is great. Will it protect you 100% of the time? No.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and Kathy, you said which apartment complex were you at, if you don't mind me saying?
Tara at Hazel Dell.
And do you guys like have an apartment watch or anything like that going on there yet?
There, well, you know, do you mean like people do neighborhood watch?
Exactly. Yes.
We're a whole bunch of nosy people. Evidently, this happens when we're sleeping, and it's a really
Sure.
quiet kind of place. We have a security company, but you know, they only come around and make a patrol if we're lucky a couple times at night, and so I don't think it's real difficult to avoid them. And the other crime issue we had was somebody got the master key to our big mailbox.
Yes.
And they were successful, you know, in actually using some of the, I guess, a couple people's checks that they got their hands on, were able to alter them.
Yeah, mail theft is a huge problem. And sometimes it's difficult to know who to report that to because there's really both of us kind of want to know, right? So like obviously we want to know to help patrol your area better, but the the post office wants to know so that they can put up some additional security stuff on their side as well.
Yeah.
So did you, for the most part, are you guys reporting those to 911 or are you just kind of taking it on the chin?
I found out about the mail theft accidentally, just from word of mouth from somebody who was a victim, because evidently the post office didn't even tell our office management. So
Oh.
we were surprised. Why didn't they tell us this is an issue? And they said, we didn't know until you're telling us. So the post office didn't tell our management office that this had even occurred. And evidently I don't know if it was the sheriff, who it was, a suspect was actually apprehended.
Oh, well, good for us. I'm sure it was us, because
Law en-
unless it wasn't, if they got away, it was some other agency. But if we got them, it was us.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, and so one of the victims was notified by law enforcement. Here, we realize what happened to you, and here's why it happened and how it happened. So it was through the victim that we found out. The other thing, the sheriff department is called for the break-in, the car windows and the stolen vehicle. Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure. Sometimes these things happen, but victims don't think, like, it doesn't rise to the level where they think they need to report it to us, which is obviously, we'd like you to encourage to report, even if you do an online report, which is super easy. That way we have an idea of where these crimes are occurring, so we can better deploy our patrol during the day and the night and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, as far as I know, we don't have very many passive people here.
Okay, good. Good. Well, I'm sorry that happened to your community. That's too bad.
It is. It's, we think we're quiet and safe, and we're kind of under the radar. We're tucked away off of Minnehaha Street. Some people don't even know this complex is here, and we're just as happy to have that be the
Sure.
truth. But evidently people are discovering us.
Good to know.
Ryan, do you have any statistics on the trend of people getting stuff stolen off their porch when Amazon delivers packages or anything like that? And anything that you guys are keeping track of?
Not specifically that crime. I mean, obviously our tactical detective unit, if we see like there's a rash of those, we'll start to increase our presence. With doorbell cams, things have slowly started to deteriorate. Of course, people still wear face masks and still commit those sorts of crime. And then I don't know. The other thing is, I don't know how many of you have got like Amazon locking boxes, or you might be having them delivered like into your garage and that kind of thing. That's also a helpful thing at this point in time. So, but yeah, unfortunately, no, we haven't been keeping any really great statistics on that.
Do doorbell cams help with prosecution? I know that's probably not your area, but just kind of generally, is it a good thing to have a doorbell cam? They're fairly easy to get.
Yeah, no, and not just for that, but for other crimes that may occur, right? Because you might be the victim of whatever it is, but your neighbor has a doorbell cam, right? And so then from there, we can start to get suspect information or vehicle information, things like that. So yeah, it's the more cameras that are out there. Well, I hate to say it because it's a big brother kind of thing, but the more cameras that are out there, obviously the more leads we can generate to help figure out who did whatever, right? And solve those crimes.
Cool.
And one other thing I'd like to ask, and then I'll get to Kathy B, is there's always a discussion about somebody sees a strange car in their neighborhood, so something that just doesn't belong there, and there's always a question about whether it's worthy of calling it in, and maybe you could address that real quickly as far as how that builds up if there's like a series of calls from neighbors, that it's important to do something like that so that there's kind of a base to go on.
Absolutely. Yeah, what you're talking about is something we want. So if you don't feel like calling 911, 311 is an option. So that's the non-emergency 911 line. And they have a tendency to get to it really quick. So I'd recommend you call 311. And unless if it's suspicious to the fact that they've, got a gun hanging out their car or something like that's a 911 call, right? But if it's just, gosh, I've been living in this neighborhood for forever and I've never seen that silver car and it's driving really slow and it's creeping me out, it's an easy 311 call, right? So if we have officers in the area, obviously we're going to try to get to it as soon as we can, which makes sense. If we don't, say that we're so busy with other things and something does occur, we're going to pull that call up later when we're looking at what else occurred during that same time. and it hopefully gives us a lead, particularly if you get a plate or you get like a decent car description, you know, like it's a certain color, the headlights look a certain way, all of that kind of stuff. One of the things about crime, particularly when it's happening, is that people have a tendency to shut down and you almost forget what you're looking at, right? So as it occurs to you, some people are just great victim. Like they can identify, oh, it was a, 1992 Pontiac, right? Fiero, and it had these, it was the extra year where they put in the 6.4 engine or whatever it is, right? At other points in time, most people are like, I think it was a car. It might have been a motorcycle. So the more deep breaths you can take and like concentrate on, it was a car, it was an SUV, it was a crossover. I grew up in an era where cars were like a color, like there was red cars and blue cars, but now cars are like these weird, like, I don't know, yellows and purples and things. So do the best that you can with describing the color, right? And that really does help us when we're trying to look for information about what could have occurred in that area. The other thing is it pops up with, we've gotten multiple calls kind of in the same area over the same nights. If we're really on our game, we'll hopefully patrol more of those areas more often just to see if we can't catch somebody. At the very least, we can be a visual deterrent of, our patrol car being in that area will hopefully make them go somewhere else, preferably Portland, So,
Kathy, you had a question.
I saw a sign at Tenny Creek Park, which is one of several. My dog and I walk like at least probably 3 miles a day, and we go to all kinds. I love the neighborhood parks and down by the everywhere. And I scanned the QR code to sign my dog up for the Paw Patrol.
oh, good.
Are you getting any kind of response from that?
Oh, yeah, it's been fabulous. Have you been contacted by Casey Frazier yet?
No.
Oh, okay. So Casey Frazier, some of you may know her. She works a lot with community folks. She's fantastic. She's in charge of the Paws on Patrol. And it's a great program. I don't know where she found it.
I say that.
Okay.
I got a letter that I think she's the person that signed it,
Good.
So contact in that way, yes.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so we can get you signed up. I think it's a great way to help people get healthy, right? You're going to be walking your dog anyway. You get to know your areas, which really helps out. So yeah, no, I encourage anyone who wants to join up to give a call so that we can get you hooked up with the right people.
Well, and he got a cute dog tag.
Yes. Yeah, that's the other thing you get. I try not to let that out there, but yeah, you do get a pretty awesome dog tag.
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, no cats have signed up. I know there are some people who walk their cats, but no cats have been signed up yet. So
mine doesn't like to leave the backyard, so I tried. Even with a harness and a leash, they go to the edge of the fence, and that's it. I've drilled into them. It's a cruel world out there, so I guess they believe me.
great.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions for Brian? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Brian, I appreciate you showing up in the evening. I know that this is past your normal working hours and excellent presentation. And hopefully we'll hear from you again in the future.
Yes, sir. Happy to.
But again, thank you. And I know you are more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. It gets really, really boring from here. It's just me doing a lot of talking.
If it's all right, I think I'll sign off.
If you want to sign off, I understand. And that goes for Councillor Belcott and the sheriff. Is the sheriff already gone?
Yeah, I think he signed off.
Yeah, he's like a ninja.
Okay,
he sneaks out the back every time.
Yeah, I know how he can be. So anyway, once again, appreciate it. Thank you very much for showing up tonight. And
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You can't probably hear that, but thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Marilee, did you need something?
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, go ahead, Marilee.
Yeah, I was just gonna go ahead and do my regular crime prevention reminders of the don't leave your car running in the driveway for to warm it up in the morning. That was something that the sheriff has been reminding folks not to do. That's an easy way to get your car stolen. So don't leave your car running to warm it up in the morning. The other one that I've heard as a reminder at a couple of the other meetings is on your cameras that you have at the doorbell. A lot of people turn off. There's a audible reminder when people approach your door. And a lot of people like to turn that off because it's kind of annoying if you have more than one person coming in and out of the door. But it's actually a deterrent for the porch pirates because then they know that they're on the camera. So I have watched people come up to my door and go ahead and run away from my door when they hear that ding come on. They'll go ahead and leave my doorstep when they hear that ding. So if you do have that audible noise coming on, you might want to leave it on because it is a deterrent for the people that aren't supposed to be coming up to your door. And there was one other thing that was about the garage, and I can't remember what that one is. I'll probably recall it in a few minutes.
Yeah, we'll keep it closed, and then a lot of people leave it up like a little bit, like if you got a cat, right? They'll leave the garage open a little bit so the cat can get in out. Just know if a cat can get in, some human can probably find their way in as well. So
That's
just be
it.
aware of that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we're gonna go on to announcements now, Brian, and like I said, if you don't want to stick around, you don't have to, but
I think I'm going to take off. If anyone has a question later, my contact information was up there earlier. If not, contact Marilee. She can get a hold of me, and we can, if you need stats or whatever else, or you're moving to a new house, just let me know. I can help you out.
okay, great. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Okay, before I get to announcements, I'll be brief. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but every 2 months we put out a very, very good newsletter. And I just want to introduce you to the guy that's responsible for putting that out. And where I'm sitting, he is in the lower left-hand square. It's Chad Logue. That's wave at everybody. Okay, so if you've enjoyed our newsletter and you appreciate how well it's put together, he's responsible. Although I think his wife has a little bit to do with it too. Am I correct, Chad?
Yeah,
All
sometimes
you.
not as much anymore, but it's gotten a lot more challenging now that other Bill isn't participating. But
Yeah,
yeah, still a
the
little
humor
bit
side is
behind.
not-
So they've been coming out a little bit late here, but I got one in progress, so it'll be coming out here shortly as well. But yeah, newsletters every couple months we'll be sending those guys out, and just we'll keep the schedule updated as well for sure. So as we get these Zoom meetings that are being scheduled, or if we're going to go back to actual in-person meetings, things like that, try to keep those updated on the newsletter too.
Okay, and I believe that your wife does the Facebook for Northeast Hazel, correct?
Yeah, she has the Facebook. We don't probably don't post that much there, but we do provide updates when possible. So whenever new alerts come through, or if you guys are aware of anything and like for us to post it, you can also share those if you have any links. I think we've gotten a couple. I know the other bill dropped over some links for like the cancer, what is it called? The walk for cancer
The
or
Relay for Life?
Relay for Life ones. Yeah. So we've posted some of those previously. So if anyone has any links for activities, or I know that there used to be a lot more kind of shredding events, I think, from like the Lions Club, for example. If anybody has any activities that they'd like for us to post, definitely send them over, and we can share those with the Facebook group for sure.
Excellent, thank you. Appreciate what you do.
Yep.
Okay, for announcements, we'll wrap the meeting up here. I want to let you know that after quite a long wait, both Isla and I are on the Heritage Farm Sustainability Plan Steering Committee, and we had to wait kind of a while for Clark County Parks to get things going and get things ready to present to the public. But they have scheduled an open house, and for those of you that are interested in it, and I would recommend any of you that want to attend to do that. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, January 24th. And I will include this information in one of my many emails that I send out to everybody. So if you can't get this written down, that's fine. But it's at Minnehaha Elementary School, which is at 2800 Northeast 54th Street. And I would highly recommend that everybody show up and give their opinion, and Isla and I'll be there, so that if something looks really bad, you can blame it on Isla and not me. So, because I'm sure it was her fault. There's a new park going in on 17th Avenue, just north of Minnehaha Street. There was an open house, and Isla, can you remind me when that was? I think it was towards the end of December, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes, it was
Okay.
towards the end of December.
It
But
was
I'm going to
well
say-
attended, and I believe that Teresa, you were at that one too. So there was some interesting proposals put up, and they're trying to come up with a name. I've got a one that I really like, but I'm going to wait and see how the rest of the voting goes. But we will keep you updated on that process as it continues. A third thing that I would like to let you guys know is that I was just informed about the Upper Main Street Safety and Mobility Project. That is, I'm looking for my printout here. I know that West Hazel Dell at their next meeting is going to have representatives from that project to talk to people, but it's basically they're trying to improve the pedestrian safety by adding upgraded crossings and filling sidewalk gaps to improve connection to transit. And I imagine that has a lot to do with the fact that they're also planning on putting a vine up Highway 99, which is another thing that we'll keep you informed of. And according to the timeline that I have, that I got off their website, they're just starting to develop the corridor design alternatives. So I'll warn you now, I'll be at your meeting so that I can listen to what they have to say. And I'm not going to invite everybody else, but you can, if you want to, that's more than you can do that.
Bill,
And you have your hand up. Do you have?
I do. I'm being so good. I'm doing it the right way. So I'd like to loop back and just remind everyone that on January 17th, the Heritage Farm draft sustainability plan will be available on the county website. So it would give people a chance to look at it before the open house and do a little processing of what's there. And they'll also have an opportunity to leave their remarks, and that would be good too. Yeah. And the Main Street Project meeting is January 25th, and that will be at the 78th Street Public Works Building, B1. From 6.
And that'll also be on WebEx also, if you.
Well,
yes.
it'll be on something, yes.
Well, the flyer that I received from you said it would be on WebEx. So
Okay, well, there you
I'll
go.
be in person because I can't get WebEx to function for me.
Thank
so.
you.
It'll be on Zoom.
Okay, that's the official word. It'll be on Zoom. Okay. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share with the group before we go? Hearing none, the February meeting happens to fall on Valentine's Day. At this point in time, what I am envisioning scheduling is a chance for us to get together and talk about future presenters we'd like to have during the year. A little bit more of an in-depth update on Heritage Farm after the open house. And see how they're progressing with some of the other projects that are going on. And I would like everybody's feedback on what other things that they would like us to kind of keep track of as the year progresses, so that we can report back at meetings and keep people informed. And so that's what I've got scheduled for the February meeting. But my last question is going to be, is there an interest in maybe changing the date since it falls on Valentine's Day? I know that's not a huge issue for me, but I'm throwing it out there in case you guys don't really feel like showing up to a neighborhood association meeting on Valentine's Day.
How many romantics do you have in your group, Bill?
Bill, I can't remember. Did we move it last year? I feel like
We moved it last year.
We moved it by a week or something like that.
Yeah, but I need to let Marilee know ahead of time before we do that, and I don't want to do that if nobody's really interested in doing that. So how does everybody feel? You guys showed up at the meeting, so your voice carries some weight. I'm hearing absolutely nothing. So
I'm open on the 14th. I'm good with it. That's
Yeah.
not a night to go out at all. There's
Right.
long lines and it's horrible.
Okay.
You're rushed to eat.
Then we will stick with our second Wednesday and meet on Valentine's Day. So is there anything else that anybody has for good of the order before we adjourn?
That's just a thumbs up for the Valentine's bill.
Yeah, I
don't worry.
saw. I was wondering whether you were waving or that's thumbs up for Valentine's Day or thumbs up for. Okay.
I've done that before and my camera picks up on it. So if I do this, then it puts up like a thumbs up emoji too. And I'm like, what is it doing right now? But
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you've got one of those AI computers that tries to think for you. So, okay. That being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
And seconded, I'm assuming, since everybody's
Seconded.
smiling. Okay. Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate it. And we'll get the link to this meeting out as soon as we possibly can. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone.
Good job. Good meeting.
Thanks.